Hello everyone, my name is Gabby and I'm going to be reviewing episodes of Hugtto Precure. For those who may or may not know me, I'm more known for doing content about Dragon Ball on Mozilla Vulpix, but I've also been a massive Precure fan, and I've also been wanting to do videos about Precure and in fact particular episode reviews for actually years, like literally about 3 years now. But I never really had the right time or right motivation to really start doing it until now. So I'm going to be reviewing Hugtto Precure. Hopefully it lasts. I want to get to the end of the season. I want to try and do this a weekly thing, so we'll see, and let's get started. My formats might be a little bit different for people who are kind of used to other kinds of episode reviews. So what I generally do is I do a very short summary of the episode, of what happened in the episode. Then I talk about what I liked and what I didn't like and thoughts about next episode. Because after all, especially in a series like this, Precure is a kind of series where you kind of often know where the story is going to go. Recapping the story isn't really something that's really a priority for me when reviewing an episode. I'm coming into this series with a very clear understanding of what these episodes are going to be like concept-wise. For me, what's really interesting and what kind of matters to me is the execution, and to see whether the execution was good or not. So, without further ado, Hugtto Precure Episode 1. Our protagonist, Hana, is trying to be a cool, mature, grown-up type for her new school, and starts it off by overcutting her bangs, and being late, and embarrassing herself by being overly enthusiastic in her introduction. But she's not going to let a few mistakes stop her. That night, she's visited by a mysterious baby Hugtan and a talking mouse creature Harry, who seem to want to try and stay in her house, but vanish as soon as she starts having doubts. The next day at school, a mysterious villain attacks, searching for a Mirai crystal. As Hana sees Hugtan in danger, she rushes to protect her, saying that that's the kind of person she wants to be. This causes her to create a Mirai crystal of her own, and transform into the Precure Girl. She defeats the monster and uses her power to help Hugtan, while Harry wonders just how much power she has. So, what did I like about this episode? Well, first of all, let's talk about our protagonist. I'm honestly really enjoying Hana as the protagonist, and in particular as a Precure protagonist. And I think the biggest reason as to why is because of her sort of dream, her kind of goal, her kind of big sort of motivation that we saw in this first episode that's presumably going to last throughout most of the season. And that's that her dream is to become this sort of like more grown-up, mature, cool, sort of like big sister type person. Basically, she wants to be cooler and more mature, and that's kind of what drives her in this episode and presumably for the entire season. See, what I like about this motivation is that, first of all, it's very kind of realistic. Partially because it's very broad, but it's also very appealing. The idea of wanting to be kind of older and cooler and more mature is something that's very appealing. Heck, I'm almost 23 and I think I still have that motivation sometimes. And the other thing that's great about her motivation is it really ties into the themes of the series. It's like Hana wants to be more mature, and when she becomes a Precure, and when all of these characters become Precure, they are basically career themed. They're themed after kind of like being adult and being more mature, and heck, they even wear makeup. And then there's also the other big part of this season, and that is raising Hugtan, like kind of being a mother as well. The other job of being a Precure, it seems like, is to be a mother to Hugtan, and that also ties into the idea of kind of growing up and being more mature. It's literally them taking on the role of somebody who's more mature because they do have to take care of this baby. Basically, this whole thing is a really good sign that the people who are doing this season kind of know what their themes are and are actually relating it to their protagonist in a really believable way. I don't want to be that kind of person that tries to make this season look better by kind of making other seasons look crap. But if you compare it to somebody like, say, Megumi in Happiness Charge Precure, where a lot of her main motivation, or at least her main motivation for being a Precure, besides like being a good person, was that she wanted to collect all the pre-cards to wish for her mother to be much more healthy again. And that is like a motivation that is like, on the one hand, it's a motivation, but on the other hand, it's not really necessarily a motivation that relates to anything else that's going on in the season or really kind of like a lot of the big themes. Not to mention, Hana is just overall a really kind of relatable, but also really great person. Like, one of the big establishing moments is of her jumping in front of an old woman to stop her from getting hit by a bull, and then being late for her first day of school because she's helping the old woman carry her belongings. And then when she has her big sort of school introduction, she kind of gets really overly enthusiastic over trying to explain what her goals are and what her dream is, and then she actually gets kind of laughed at for it. Which is one of those kind of like breaths of fresh air of realism where it's like, oh yeah, no. Like, if a legit full-on shoujo protagonist showed up in your school and started going on about their dreams, you'd probably think they were a bit ridiculous too. So basically, she feels somewhat relatable, she feels somewhat grounded, but yet I can also understand why she's the protagonist and why she would be especially good at being a Precure compared to like any other 13-year-old girl. And I think that's a pretty good achievement to get out from the first episode. As for what I didn't like about this episode, well, first of all, kind of Saya and Humare's introductions, the girls who are also going to be Precure later on. Well, they're definitely going to get focus episodes before they transform, so we kind of understand what they're like. The fact is, the episode chose to actually probably kind of introduce them in this episode, but at the same time, they left a lot of things kind of up to the imagination, which I feel like might make the first-time viewer a little bit confused. In particular, the scene when Hana starts chasing after Hugtan's yells and ends up right in front of Saya and Humare, and Saya was basically saying that she was looking for her and that she wanted to show her around, and basically that she wants to be Hana's friend. Without proper context of these characters, I feel like I was left a little bit confused over whether Saya wanted to be friends with Hana just because that's the kind of person Saya is and Saya is just really friendly, or was it just a one-time thing where Saya particularly thought that Hana's introduction made her seem like a really cool person and she wanted to hang out with her. And the same also goes for Humare. What was Humare actually doing there with Saya? Is Humare a friend of Saya's, and that's why she was just kind of hanging out with her? And if that's the case, then why did we see her mostly hanging out on her own, on a bench just like directly above them? It's almost like the implication is that these two girls are the only people who want to be Hana's friends, but considering in this episode we didn't really get to see proper evidence of that, it just feels like a lot was left to the imagination. Also, the fight scene was really cool, but it was also kind of pretty short. I mean, I know I don't want to be that person who's like, oh, we should go back to Futariwa where there was just punching all the time and we'd have all the punchings and so many fight scenes. Like, I understand that Kira particularly toned them down, partially because like some adults and some children actually found it a little bit scary. But at the same time, in this first ever fight, in Cure Yell's first ever time being a Precure, all she actually does is grab the monster of the week, throw him once, and then immediately bust out her finishing move. We don't really get to see her adjusting to her powers or seeing what she could do, or doing that cliche where they automatically jump and then they find out they're in the middle of the air and they don't know how to get down. It was just she grabs a guy, she throws the guy, and then she finishes off the guy. To be fair, there was a lot of stuff that they had to cram into this episode, and if they wanted to put more of a fight scene, they'd have to rush everything else in the episode, but I just hope this isn't a trend. I hope we do get fight scenes that last longer than like 2 minutes next time. As for next episode, while we may not know much about Saya now, we're probably going to find out more about her next week, given that she's going to be the second Precure Cure Ange. Ange? I think I'm going to get very confused over Japanese pronunciations versus English pronunciations. I'm just going to go with Ange because it's short for angel, presumably. There was a lot of introductions and exposition crammed into this episode, and I know a lot of that is going to also end up being in next episode as well, but hopefully the episode will have enough time to really show Saya and what she can do and what her character is like, and what she adds to the team dynamic. So that was Hugtto Precure episode 1, and honestly I think it was a really good introduction. Obviously in these first episodes they often have a lot of different things they want to have to go and explain, and it sometimes means that the pacing can be a little bit rushed or it doesn't focus as much on the things that you really kind of care about. At this point there are a lot of things and a lot of question marks that we have about Harry and Hugtan, about the villains, about what Precure are in the first place and what their actual goal is, as well as a lot of the other characters in the school as well as in Hana's family. But I think it managed this job pretty well. At the very least, it is keeping me engrossed because I legitimately do want to know more about the world and what the actual scenario of this season is. The only unfortunate consequence of the quick pacing was obviously the fight scene being kind of short and not really showing us much about how the Precure fight in this season and how it differs from, say, last season. But of course, that's an issue that can be easily alleviated in the upcoming episodes, so I think it was a pretty good success. These episode reviews aren't necessarily going to be the fastest or the first or even the best edited reviews to come out, especially considering I am also still reviewing Dragon Ball Super, which is still going on, but I do at least try to aim to make my reviews informative and also coming out before the next episode is out. So if you guys liked this format and want to see more, and if you even have some constructive criticism or any ideas as to how you guys would want me to review things you wanted me to talk about, leave something in the comment section and I'll look at it and get back to you. So this is Gabby signing out, and I'll see you all next week. Bye guys!